I'd like to welcome you to our Connection class. My name is Reverend Josh Attaway. I'm the campus pastor at St. Luke's in Edmond. Over the next 4 weeks, you're going to be learning more about who we are as a family of faith and our values to share Christ, to grow in our faith, to serve the community. And on the last week, you're going to learn more about what it means to be connected in the life of this family of faith and how you can find the ministry that God is calling you to. Over the next 4 weeks, you're also going to get to meet some of our clergy and our staff. You'll get to see their faces and hear from them as they talk about sharing, growing, serving, and getting connected. You're going to learn more about the ways that you can find your place to plug in. You know, these values of share, grow, and serve, they're really the how of our mission at St. Luke's. At St. Luke's, you always hear us talk about our mission is to share God's love and bring hope to the world. How do we do that? By sharing Christ, by growing in our faith, and by serving the community. But you know, these values aren't just new to us at St. Luke's. They're not something that we just came up with. They're part of a long history of who we are as people of faith. At St. Luke's, we trace our roots all the way back to John Wesley, back in the 1700s in England, as he was forming the Methodist movement, this revival movement there in England, trying to light a fire within the people, to find the ways to bring together evangelism, a commitment to growing in faith, but also these works of piety. How do we work together for justice and for serving our community? The reality is, it wasn't John Wesley that came up with these ideas either, though. It really goes all the way back to the beginning with the ministry of Jesus Christ in the early church. As we talk this week about what it means to share Christ, we remember the Great Commission that comes in Matthew chapter 28. When Jesus would come and appear to his disciples and he would tell them to go out into all nations baptizing people in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. This commandment from Christ to share God's love with others, it's foundational to who we are as a family of faith, and it has been since day one of St. Luke's on that first Sunday after the land run.
It was on that first Sunday after the land run, April 28, 1889. The sound of the bugle was heard, a white flag was staked into the ground, and a group of people came together to worship and to sing, "What a friend we have in Jesus." These were the pioneers who weren't afraid to confront the difficulties of the future, but they knew they needed a family of faith. So they came together, and St. Luke's was born.
It was a grace moment, that day on the dusty red Oklahoma clay. Only God could foresee the impact of what was taking place. Faithful men and women gathered around a white flag to stake their claim for the generations to come, believing that their children and grandchildren would know the one true God. The seeds planted in that moment would bear fruit in the city and around the world.
In 1893, our dedicated founders built the Tabernacle, a place for gathering together in worship, for sharing each other's burdens, and celebrating one another's joys. In 1908, the church moved to 8th and Robinson under the name of St. Luke's, where membership would climb to almost 1,000. As we continued to grow, we again needed to relocate to accommodate the people coming to hear the message. In 1951, St. Luke's moved to our current location at 15th and Robinson, and eventually became the second largest Methodist church in America. While we raised money to build a new sanctuary, we gave $25,000 to Asbury Methodist Church to begin.
The 1960s, 70s, and 80s were difficult decades for Oklahoma City. There was financial strain, civil unrest, a major oil crash, and the mass exodus of people moving from the city to the suburbs. The struggles of our community affected our members and our ministry.
St. Luke's, which had once been the second largest Methodist church in the nation, decreased in membership from almost 10,000 to 4,000. In the midst of these difficult years, the church made a pivotal decision that would have tremendous impact. Reverend Dr. David Thomas led in the creation of the Christian Life Center. This project was an incredible leap of faith when so many were moving out of the downtown area. However, the congregation's commitment would become a formative step in the history of St. Luke's. The vision to build when it seemed there was little to build for created the space that would be needed for the thriving urban community we have today. The Christian Life Center was completed shortly after the arrival of Dr. Robert E. Long in 1991. Dr. Long and the church leadership saw the priority of reaching new people for Christ and continued the commitment of sharing God's love and the message of hope. To encourage individuals to develop their faith, St. Luke's began a midweek program known as Wednesday Night Alive. Throughout the years, this ministry has provided the opportunity for people to grow in their relationship with God through Bible study and topic-based classes.
In 1992, a door was opened for members of St. Luke's to travel to Ulyanovsk, Russia. Stepping out in faith, our congregation raised the money for this post-Cold War cultural exchange. Through this experience, salvation came, lifelong friendships were formed, and 3 Methodist churches were established in Russia: Ulyanovsk United Methodist Church, St. Luke's United Methodist Church of Ulyanovsk, and the Tyumen United Methodist Church in Siberia all continue to share God's love today. In our commitment to sharing Christ, St. Luke's launched a television ministry in 1993 to reach the larger community with our message of hope. In 1998, a new vision for worship led to the creation of a contemporary worship service, Lifelight. As a result, Sunday services expanded to 3 time slots, and the ministry grew to both traditional and modern worship styles. Lifelight also accommodated the growing needs of our congregation and proved to be vital in the ministry of our church. The renovation of the Christian Life Center in 2011 created additional seating for the Lifelight worship service, as well as provided a beautiful place for church and outside groups to meet.
In addition to our television broadcast, we began an inspirational radio message for morning commuters titled Something to Think About in 1999, which now airs daily on 6 metro radio stations. This has provided St. Luke's the opportunity to be an encouraging voice to our community and has opened doors for our ministry in the hearts of individuals who would not otherwise hear us. In 2013, St. Luke's began expanding beyond our downtown campus to share God's love and bring hope in other locations around our city. We started by partnering with Epworth Villa Retirement Community, broadcasting our traditional service to homebound members every Sunday morning. St. Luke's Asbury joined the St. Luke's family of faith, becoming the first of our satellite campuses. In March 2014, a new congregation began meeting at Sequoia Middle School, launching our St. Luke's Edmond campus.
We are a family of faith with a rich heritage and a bright future. Thank you, St. Luke's, for carrying out the mission of those original settlers who staked our white flag, the saints on whose shoulders we stand. Thank you for preparing a place of worship for the generations to come as we continue sharing God's love and bringing hope to the world.
People have asked me, why should they join St. Luke's? And there really is something important about making a commitment. Because really, fundamentally, it's a commitment to Christ. It's making the commitment that you want to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. You want to be a follower of His. And so I've had people say, well, Bob, I don't really know exactly what that means. I don't know how to be the follower. And I always like to say, neither did the first 12. That was the whole idea of following. The idea is you are able to see that there is something in this Jesus Christ person that you go, I want to be a disciple of His. I want to be a follower of His. And so you learn, and that happens in the process of the following. You don't have to have all the questions answered before you join. You join so you're able to be answering the questions as the years go by. And so you become the disciple in the following, being a part of a community, a family of faith. And that's the other part that winds up being so important. Because when you join a church, when you join the family of faith, then you become the person who says, I'm going to care about the other people in the family of faith. And you'll receive care from the family of faith. As we go through life, there are times you're going to have great things happen, and you want someone to celebrate with you. And there are times when you're going to have really hard things happen. And in those kinds of moments, you discover you're not alone. There's people who are there to care and support and uphold you. And so being in community, being in a family of faith is what's been so important about the church for 2,000 years. It's where people have come to discover I can be loved, I am accepted, and as I care and love and accept others, it blesses me both ways. So being the disciple, making a profession of faith, and then being a part of community are the reasons you need to be a part of a church.
At St. Luke's, we're committed to sharing Christ, growing in faith, and serving the community. That's been part of our DNA for more than 125 years. In everything that we do, as part of our program and our mission, we try and accomplish those three things. And we encourage each of our members to try and be living out that mission by sharing, growing, and serving in their own lives. You know, the best way to share Christ is to invite someone to come to church so that they can experience the message of God's love and hope for themselves. And so we encourage people, invite a friend or a relative or a neighbor or a coworker to join you in worship. What an easy way to come together and to experience the message of God's love. We have all kinds of opportunities to be growing in faith here at St. Luke's. We really encourage people to be a part of a disciple Bible study or a small group or a Sunday school class so that you can be learning more about your faith, you can be growing in your faith, and you can be learning from other Christians about what it means to walk the Christian journey. Well, if you're excited about serving, you've come to the right place. St. Luke's has so many opportunities to serve. We try and make opportunities available to everyone, regardless of age or ability or even time commitment. You can serve once a week, once a month, once a year. There are opportunities to serve locally, nationally, and internationally, and we'd love to get you plugged in so that you can be serving. Through the years, the lay and staff leadership of our church have discussed a set of values that help us to live out our mission statement of sharing God's love and bringing hope to the world. And so we have a dynamic list of values that we seek to live in a very practical way. Things such as beauty. If you take time to walk around the church, whether it's through the beautiful buildings or through the gardens or courtyards, you'll see the beautiful architecture of our campuses. You'll see the beautiful landscaping that adorns all of our facilities. And you'll see the beauty in the people. And that's part of how we express the beauty that God has created in the world. We want our facilities to be beautiful so that you can feel God's love and experience God's presence in your life. We also talk a lot here about grace. Grace is God's constant goodwill for us, His children. And we experience grace every day in our lives. We experience grace in our relationships with one another, but first and foremost, it's the grace that God gives to us, His unmerited, undeserved, free gift of love towards us, His children. We experience that when we go to weddings or when we go to funerals. We experience it in worship every Sunday, and we experience it in the relationships that we have with one another. So we try and live that grace in our lives so that others can experience God's grace as well. You'll also see us living out the value of paying fantastic attention to detail. One of the values that we try and uphold here at the church is that whenever there's a piece of trash on the ground, we'll try and make sure and we pick it up. Or wherever there's something out of place, we try and make sure it has its place. And we try and make sure that we pay fantastic attention, whether it's in the details of a print publication, or it's a video that we're making, whether it's in our worship service, or it's in one of our mission projects. It's simply a way that we know that God cares for the details of our lives, and we care for the details together as a church family.
Every church has a personality. And I think the personalities get established early on. And I think what makes St. Luke's such a special church is the fact that it was started on the first Sunday after the land run. The people who started the church were truly pioneers. They were people who were willing to dream, to risk, to have a vision of hope for the future. And since those were the people who came together to establish the church, you created kind of that culture, that ethos, the DNA early on. Who are the people who are here? That spirit has continued on in the church now for 128 years. And what I love about the church is when you come, you find people who are ready to dream, people who are creative. They're open to learning and doing things in new ways. I've been here 26 years. And you know, in 26 years, I have never heard from the leaders of the church, Bob, we've never done that way before. We've never done it that way before. Never have heard that. When we dream up new ideas, people are saying, let's think about how to do this. Let's try something new. The feeling you have here is people who are saying, wouldn't it be great if? Why don't we? And so people are open to dreaming and trying new things. And I think that's a wonderful spirit. I think that's what Christ calls out of His disciples, to be open, to being led into new ways of living and sharing and growing. So we will go through and we do that as a family of faith. But also as a family of faith, what I've loved from the beginning that you see, it was not only creative, daring people, incredibly compassionate people. From the earliest of days, this church has been involved in reaching out to bless life. This isn't something new. I mean, we may have after-school programs for more than 400 kids now, and we have 600 in child cares, and we've been starting churches in Russia, and we do mobile meals, and on and on and on. That's just living out what was started so long ago. There is this incredible sense of compassion. And I think the one other thing that really makes this church unique is its sense of openness, welcoming. We don't have a sense that we have all the truth, or we're the only ones. You know, John Wesley, the founder of the Methodist Church, was so very clear about that and saying, you know, if you love Christ and you love your neighbor, give me the right hand of fellowship. Let's be friends. And so at St. Luke's, we've really believed in that issue of think and let think, another thing John Wesley said. So we believe God is in the Baptist and Catholic and Presbyterian and Lutheran church, all these different churches, and we can show great respect and work together to dream dreams, and we're not having to claim to be the best or the only. It's what makes us be open to working with our Muslim brothers and sisters and our Jewish brothers and sisters. There is this sense of we're all trying as hard as we can to be good people who follow and love God. And so I've loved the fact that St. Luke's has always had an open spirit and an accepting spirit. And when you combine that with a sense of compassion and a desire to dare and dream, great things happen. It really is a wonderful family of faith.
At St. Luke's, we have two main styles of worship. We have traditional and contemporary. Our traditional services feature more traditional hymns. They have the pipe organ. In our contemporary services, we have a band with a keyboard and guitars and drums. But the most important thing at St. Luke's is that we communicate the same message throughout our worship services. The same sermon, the same pastors preaching, and we think it's important to have a unified message. We share God's love throughout our worship, and we start with Scripture, and we talk about how that applies to our life today. The order of worship is the way we plan a worship service. There's a flow to it. We are intentional about the things that we do when we come before God. We gather together. We have a time where we lift up our prayers. We have times that we sing songs, whether it's hymns in the traditional service or more contemporary songs in the contemporary service. We have a time to reflect on the scripture and hear the message that God has for our lives today. And then we have a time to give back, give our thanks, give our gifts, and then we are sent forth into the world to make a difference. You may wonder why we use certain elements in worship. For example, the stoles or the color of the paraments, the color of the altar cloth or our stoles. Stoles are a symbol of the towel that Jesus wore when he washed the feet of the disciples. And so when a clergy person wears a stole, it's a sign of their servanthood, a commitment to serve Christ in all they do. In the early history of the church, most of the people couldn't read, and so the church used a variety of different methods to help the people learn about faith, to learn more about God, and to learn the scriptural lessons. They used pictures, artwork, sculptures. They also used symbolism through colors. We use different colors throughout the year as a reminder, as a symbolism of that special time in the Christian season. For example, we'll use purple during the season of Lent because purple is not only a color of royalty, but it's also a more somber, reflective color. And Lent is a time when we reflect on our relationship with the Prince of Peace. We use red during the season of Pentecost because red symbolizes fire. It's a reminder of the tongues of fire that were over each of the disciples' heads at the day of Pentecost. It's a sign of the Holy Spirit coming down and enlivening all of us in our relationships with God. White is a symbol of purity and holiness. And so we use the color white at times of baptisms or weddings or Holy Communion, times that are of incredible importance and sanctity in the life of the church. And we use green as a sign of growth. The color green is used in what's called ordinary time in the Christian year, although I've never liked ordinary time because there's never an ordinary time in the life of the church. Everything is extraordinary when we come before God. But green reminds us that we are committed to grow in our faith, to grow in our love and understanding of God.
Worship is so important because in the midst of a very busy world, worship is when we grow still and we are pulled back to center. It's really about taking the time to stop and you come into the presence of God. It is about coming so that you feel God's presence. And when you feel God's presence, it really helps to refocus on what matters. What are the things that matter? When you feel loved by God, when you feel forgiven by God, it then is going to change the way you go out and treat other people. We all know it's a fundamental thing. If I feel loved and I feel forgiven, I tend to be a more loving and forgiving person. So studies have shown that people who really are attending worship, especially together with family, friends, tend to be far more loving and forgiving than those who don't. That's the spirit of who we are here at St. Luke's. And so we come together to remember our priorities, to remember what matters, to come into God's presence, and then it enables us to go back into the world and to live in a spirit of hope and peace and joy, to live in a whole different way because we came to worship.
One of the things I love about St. Luke's is our connection with one another. People will go to any of our worship services and they find they have a home. And that's because from the very first time that we created a different worship service, we made a point that it wouldn't cause division, but just create more opportunities to be in worship with God. And so whether you attend the contemporary worship service downtown or the traditional worship service in Edmond, or you watch online, you'll find the same message, the same preaching, and your same family of faith.
Hi, I'm Tish Tate Garcia. Thank you so much for watching the videos on sharing Christ within our family of faith here at St. Luke's. It means so much that you took your time to learn more about what it means to share Christ. I've been a church member for 25 years and on the hospitality team many of those years, and I've had the beautiful blessing of getting to see what it means to share Christ in many different settings. A recent one was a brand new first-time guest signed in online. I reached out to her. She's from Florida, and she wrote back and really shared what it meant, the various things that we have online, and she watched, and it was a beautiful expression of how much it meant to her. And the big exciting thing was she only learned about St. Luke's through a church member who is local here, and they were college roommates. So special. So thank you again for investing time to learn more about St. Luke's and what it means to share Christ here in our family of faith. And if you want to learn more, and we absolutely encourage that, please go to our website, stlukesokc.org, or email membership@stlukesokc.org. Thanks again.